to another episode of Slay Now. It's Maureen Montagne.
Hello mga madam, I'm Samantha Panlilio.
Slay Now is your ultimate guide in facing each day ready to slay.
But first, let's kick things off with our Fab Find of the Day.
The item that we love, that we think you'd love too.
Our Fab Find of the Day is a journal!
So Sammy actually got us matching journals for Christmas.
Yes.
Thank you, Sam. And they're personalized. Mine says Mau and has the Cancer zodiac sign.
Mine has Sam Can, of course, with the Capricorn sign.
And we love these because these are actually half planner, half journal, so you can keep track. Have you been using yours?
Yes, it's actually my first time to ever put some daily entries. And I'm following your advice, and it really helps. I really like it. Yeah, it's good to reflect.
Keep track of things, and journals are very personal, so grab one you love that you can take with you all throughout your year.
You can find them online or also stores at the mall, so they're very readily available for anyone.
Yes, and that's our Fab Find of the Day. Journals!
I love that we have matching journals, huh, Mau? Fit for besties.
Yes, and I love the colors. They're very fab.
Right. Anyway, welcome back to Slay Now with Sam
and Mau.
Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube and of course give us a follow too on Spotify.
Check the links in the description for more info. This show wouldn't be possible without JC Premier. Thank you, JC Premier, the best vitamins in the Philippines.
Facts. Thank you, JC Premier.
We'd also like to thank Fridays Puerto Galera for co-presenting this episode.
The best luxury resort in Oriental Mindoro. Let's get this show on the road.
So, Sam, here on Slay Now, we believe that mental health is as important as physical health.
Facts. And the reason why Maureen and I are sitting beside each other is because we have a special guest for you today.
That's right. She is the co-founder and chief product and data officer of Mindnation, a mental health and well-being organization with a mission of bringing mental health care to communities here and abroad.
What I love about our guest, Mau, is that she's a mental health advocate. So please welcome to Slay Now, Cat Triviño.
Hi, ladies.
Welcome!
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you for coming.
Yes. So how is your 2024 going so far?
It's been great. It's been eventful. I really love the new updates and new things that are coming up for the organization and for myself also personally.
So we've both heard you speak and we think you're so inspiring. Can you tell us what inspired you to start and get involved with Mindnation?
Oh my goodness. First of all, it gets me, it feels weird when I am told that I'm inspiring because it's something that I really don't use to describe myself. I just use, and I work through my advocacies and my mission every day, just being myself. And I think that's what I talked to you guys about the last time we were talking about authenticity.
Right.
When we started Mindnation, it was a long journey towards self-discovery and also healing for me. I used to work in a corporate space where even until now, mental health still isn't widely accepted. It's heavily stigmatized. And when I got to exploring a bit more about my personal issues, personal trauma, and things along the way that have brought me to eventually get diagnosed with severe clinical depression, I have also learned the things that were missing when it comes to mental health care in the Philippines, the processes that were lacking, protocols, the lack of access, and the lack of people even just generally talking about it. Right. And that's when I got connected to fellow advocates that have eventually become my partners to develop an organization where we not only normalize that, but we make it as accessible and as affordable as possible for people like me to keep growing and keep moving forward. So we started that and we started ideating in 2019. I got depressed and diagnosed with depression in 2018. It was a very difficult period in my life. And during that time, that was, it has brought me so much healing and so much hope to be working towards something that was bigger than myself.
Right.
And when we got together to ideate on an organization, we were thinking about some of the lapses in the system. People don't talk about it. People didn't have the right access to it. It was very expensive. People were charging about more than $20, about 4,000 pesos an hour just to talk to a psychologist. So we wanted to make sure we made it as affordable as possible. And our first mission was to get it to organizations and teams.
Right.
Have it as part of the employee benefits or employee engagement programs. Because just like how they have HMOs or physical health benefits, it's just like what you said, it's just as important as your physical health. So it started off from there. And it's a bittersweet thing that happened. We had the pandemic. The organization blew up. It has become such a big part of many organizations and many teams' lives. We partnered with government officials, fellow advocates, NGOs to make it as accessible as possible, to have teletherapy be available for them. And fast forward to today, we're now 100 plus strong organization. We are operating all across Asia and in Latin America as well. So it's been quite a journey, and I'm looking forward to the many wonderful things that's in store for the organization, but the mission also in general.
Awesome. I mean, congratulations. That's great news. I feel that, spreading awareness is always a good thing. So if I may ask, what are the common misconceptions about mental health when you first launched MindNation?
Right. When we first launched, and this was something that I also faced personally myself, it was something that, like I mentioned, heavily stigmatized. People don't really talk about it. When you think about talk therapy, it seems as if it's something so trivial, it should be free. Right. It's people don't see it as any different. Speaking to an expert is any different to speaking with your friend. Right. And in essence, they find it easier to just, go out, get a drink, and I feel somewhat the same versus speaking with a therapist. And another big misconception is when they do get into trying therapy for the first time, they also assume that one session is going to do it all. Right. When in fact, that's just your intake session where you just talk about everything that's been going on that you can't really encapsulate into 1 hour. And they get really disappointed that there's no progress after one session. Right. And I get it. It's such a big investment for many Filipinos who could barely afford meals in a day or in a week to go to therapy. But it's such an important part of the process of healing to be able to speak to an expert. In the Philippines also, we're a very family-centric and religious country. Right. So we often think that when we have mental health issues, it's an issue on not praying as much as we should, or we're not talking to our parents as much, or this is something that's also a generational issue where they feel, people of the older generation, they feel that I have not experienced this. You guys are just making this up. Exactly.
Yeah. You're being dramatic.
Yeah.
Being dramatic.
Some people even think that mental health is luxurious problem to have.
Exactly. Yeah. And when you think about it, yes, maybe it is, because you're aware of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where self-actualization and really reflecting in yourself and what your issues are, traumas, and everything that's brought you to be who you are today, those things come after your basic needs are met. When you're not hungry, when you get enough sleep, when you feel like you belong, that's when you start to have the time to think about all these other things. So it can be a luxurious thing, but a lot of people tend to ignore the fact that even the most basic things, our physical health also is connected so deeply with our mental health. When we're depressed, when we're not feeling our best, it can be hard for us to eat properly. Our gut health is also deeply connected with mental health issues. So they're all interconnected. Right. And it's a very human thing for you to be thinking about your emotions. Everybody has emotions. Everybody has bad days and good days. When you talk about mental health, it's not about feeling good and positive all the time. It's also acknowledging and, in a way, being grateful also of the bad things, of the bad feelings. We tend to push away the negative emotions because who wants to feel angry, who wants to feel sad and frustrated. But those things are also important. They're what makes us human.
Yeah, I think regulating our emotions is so important. And like you said, I do think the mental affects the physical. So I'm also always chasing happy endorphins. So for me, going to the gym really helps. If I had a horrible day, even if I don't want to run, I'll run just to get those happy hormones and, you know, work on my overall health, because as we've said, both are equally as important.
Exactly. So here, living in the Philippines, if I may, what are some of the toxic Filipino traits that are quite common nowadays?
And how can we improve them?
Of course.
Some generational things that hopefully we can break.
Oh my goodness. Where do I...
If you could name your top 3.
Top 3 things. I think the biggest and number one is being able to recognize that we do have our bad days. We've talked about this very briefly. It's very common and something that we're quite known for as Filipinos, to be very happy and positive people. And that's great. It's great to be positive and happy all the time, but then that turns into toxic positivity where you feel like it's wrong to be sad, it's wrong to have negative feelings, it's wrong to feel angry. When in fact, it's like exactly like what you said. When you're taking care of your mental health, it's about balance. It's about knowing and recognizing and feeling your feelings when they are negative, letting that just happen and going through that emotion, and then figuring out the best way when you how you can cope with these negative emotions. So you don't have to be okay all of the time. And they say that it's very cliche to say it's okay not to be okay, but recognizing and also being okay with those negative feelings is something that definitely should be addressed when it comes to Filipino toxic traits. Another would be how we deal with our relationships with our family.
Of course.
Because as Filipinos, and of course I say this with personal experience as well, where I always feel that I have to be number one at the beck and call of my family. They're your family. You have to love them. You have to be with them. You have to accept them for who they are. When there's so much generational trauma that has to be unpacked with many families, not just Filipinos. So having open communication and creating that safe space from the family unit is very important. And that's something that I know a lot of Gen Zs and millennials are getting used to. They're struggling with speaking with their parents about their mental health. But the more that we talk about it, and the more that we also recognize that it's okay to set boundaries with families and with people that we love, then it also helps with healing for the next generation. There are future children or people that we also talk to get to heal from their traumas as well. And the last would probably be the mission of Mindnation as well, where in the workplace, it's not just in the Philippines though, generally, we don't talk about our emotions at work. You're made to be professional, right? Your emotions should be left at the door. And I feel this is the same in any industry, in the pageant industry most especially, where we were just talking about like, you can be yourself, but you can't be
fully yourself.
Because, that's not professional. People don't want a sad beauty queen. People don't want someone that talks about their the difficult emotions all of the time. And it's the same in the office. When you're a boss, a leader, you are made out to be someone who just gets everything done, someone who has it all figured out. And that's something that really creates a lot of difficulty in the workplace. You don't get to be productive because you are hindering yourself from being your truest and most authentic self. And when we talk about mental health in the office, we have to make, for leaders and for organizations, you have to make that access to good mental health care possible for your employees so that they can effectively also work and be their best possible selves in the office.
So very true.
So can I ask, I've had friends who are taking care of themselves, improving, and along the way they've been diagnosed with depression, bipolar disorder, and other things. How do you support a friend, a family member, a loved one through this process? Because oftentimes, especially if your family is not very educated about mental health and you're trying to work on yourself, how do you deal with this, and how do you help support somebody who's discovering things or possibly even unpacking trauma?
The first thing that I learned about being there for someone that needs mental health support, I learned that this through my psychologist when I had to bring my sister over to therapy with me, because at that time I was living by myself. I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't want to talk to family. I didn't want to open up to them. I was the eldest amongst five kids, and eldest also with the cousins and everything. So I was sort of made out to be this role model that had to have everything figured out. So I didn't want to admit to anyone that I was going through things that I didn't know what it was. I'm the kind of person that needs to know, okay, what are my next steps? Am I going to heal from this? Is this it? Do I need to take medications, etc.?
A planner. As a Capricorn.
As a Capricorn.
I feel you.
Right? And when my psychologist said, no, you have to, like, just at least one person who you can run to and call anytime. Like, someone from the family, you can be there to support you. Preferably someone that's easily accessible to you. And that one was my sister. And I brought her over. And I was just, very nervous when my psychologist started talking to her about what's been going on.
Right.
It was a great first step for me also to open up to someone very close to me who, she's younger than me. She's a few years younger than me. And it's scary to have to admit to her that there's something going on with your out there.
When you've been such a role model.
Exactly. And
years.
She was mostly confused about what was going on.
I see.
But then when my psychologist, she asked, like, what do I do when she's crying? What do I do when she's going through things or she doesn't want to eat, etc.? And my psychologist, you don't have to force yourself to know what the right thing to say is. Sometimes even just being there, your presence and listening and just sitting down and just being around matters so much. I think it's counterproductive to force yourself to think of like the right and most compelling advice to give your friend, and you do want to be there for them. You do want to give them advice that will take them out of that dark place, but sometimes that can turn out for the worse, because you're unless you're a psychologist yourself, you're not the expert, right? And it can be harder for them to hear things like, you know, you'll get through it, etc., because it also may end up feeling like you're minimizing the problem that they're facing. So just simply being there is more than enough. If you do want to take that next step, I would suggest that there are several organizations that do mental health first aid. So it's kind of like the regular first aid that you do. It's similar to like, okay, how do you put on a Band-Aid? Or you're not there to heal the person. You're there to bridge them to like what they're going through right now until they can be well enough to go to an expert for it.
So kind of like how to react.
Exactly. So you're taught like the principles of looking, listening, and linking. Looking would be recognizing the problems, because more often than not, a lot of mental health issues aren't visible. You can be the happiest, smiliest, like the best and brightest light in the room, and have the deepest and most scarring struggles. And that's a reality too, because a lot of people have learned to mask how they're feeling and their truest selves.
Especially high-functioning people and professionals.
I think a really accurate example of that is Robin Williams, the comedian. Such a joy, such a light, but really struggled internally.
And how many times have we heard that come from friends and family, like we didn't know that something was going on, when a lot of times it is kind of visible and you're not noticing it. And so mental health first aid does train with that. They help you recognize tentpole signs on someone struggling with mental health concerns, listening, how to properly listen, and you echo back or mirror the things that they are saying to make them feel heard. And because sometimes it's not as simple as just sitting down and being there, you also have to recognize what they're saying and understand it from their point of view, and how to properly link them to experts. Because it's not also as simple as maybe you should go to a therapist. Excuse me,
They would get
there's
defensive.
something wrong. Exactly. So how do I properly link them to the right people and people that they will trust? Because at the end of the day, no matter how early or how much you tell them that they should go to a therapist, if they're not ready to take that step, they're not going to do it.
Right.
So how do we do that for our friends and our loved ones? So I would suggest to do that. It's a very helpful skill to have, because you will never know. Like whenever I talk about it, when I started talking about my journey as well, I did not know that so many people in the most random places would be opening up to me. I've been open up to trauma dump in bars and first dates, exactly, in first dates and the most random things. And I can't help it, because when I start talking about, oh, what do you do for a living? And I say, oh, I work in the mental health space, and then they're like, oh, this is what's happening with my family, and I'm just like, there with my drink. Okay.
I wonder who gets more oversharing, you or a nurse, or a doctor? Because when you say I'm a doctor, oh, look at my rash, like,
is this normal?
Right.
I
I feel like she would get the most oversharing stories.
Sometimes they wouldn't even recognize it as oversharing. They would say something that's kind of like a red flag, and you're just like,
let me process this.
And then I say, are you okay? And no, not really.
Maybe to them, you're considered a safe space because you are an expert in this industry. So I know that word or term, rather, safe space, is always being thrown around. Could you delve more into that? And if we want to be a safe space for, let's say, a friend or someone going through mental health issues, how do we build that safe space?
Right. I love being considered a safe space. It's such an honor to be trusted so much with something so intimate in people's lives, and it's great. And I think more than anything is also just because they recognize that I have gone through it, and they're seeing who I am now and what I've built, and they're seeing hope more than anything, that like, oh, I can be like that too, or my child can be like that.
Right.
I have had parents come up to me with their children, talking about their children going through it also, and feeling hopeless about what their child is going through. And they see me, and they see everything that's been done, and they see that hope, and it makes me feel happy. But there are, truthfully, some times where I am not in this space also.
Right.
I mean, when I talk about my depression, when I talk about dealing with the things that I have been diagnosed with, I never once said that I am completely healed.
Right.
This has been a healing process. Those off days when I'm at my lowest and I try to go out and someone comes up to me and sees me as a safe space, I know I'm not ready to accept it, but I have to be there for them.
Do you feel comfortable ever saying, I don't have the capacity for this right now, emotionally? Or do you really try your best to help?
I try my best. I try my best to listen more than anyone, because of course I have the space and I have the channels to be able to link them to the proper experts. But usually when I'm not in the space as much, I don't dig deeper. I don't ask more questions. I just tell them, okay, maybe we can set up another time to talk about this. Maybe we can talk about something else or whatever. But before you consider yourself as a safe space and open yourself up to all of these things, if you want to help other people, you have to be able to learn to listen and become self-aware with how you're feeling as well. If you are in the capacity to listen to them, because sometimes it might even end up that you fuel each other's negative emotions, and it doesn't work well for both of you.
Of course.
And if you are an empath, or if you're someone who also kind of carries and absorbs these negative energies, you will end up a lot sadder, a lot heavier than originally intending to be able to help them.
Exactly.
So learning to listen to yourself, being aware, checking in regularly with an expert, even though you're feeling okay, there are very healthy practices for you to really fully be that safe space that you need to be.
Awesome.
And I can also see that in the workplace. Let's say if there's a lot of negativity around, it's very okay to step away. Let's say there's too much chismes or there's so many issues. Protect yourself.
Set your boundaries.
Set boundaries. It's so healthy. Because I myself, I feel like I'm a therapist to a lot of my friends, and I need to realize that sometimes I need a break and that I need to talk about my feelings as well.
Yeah.
So it's really important to not only address other people's, but be honest about your own feelings and emotions.
I'm her therapist.
Are you? I'm yours.
And that's great to have like those kinds of friendships where you are openly supporting each other, and I'm sure both of you can also openly say to each other when, okay, I'm not in the space to talk about this. Let's set up a coffee date next week. And those boundaries are very healthy.
Yeah.
In the workplace, like what you mentioned, people will usually say like, hindi ka naman marunong makisama,
right,
or like that feeling that you have to be there, you have to be listening to the chismes, you have to be part of the group,
right,
because if you step away, it looks like you could end up seeming like you're not friendly, you come off as someone that doesn't want to be, doesn't want to belong, right? And I think a lot of the younger generation are so much better than that, more than the older ones.
Right.
Yes. They have all these terms like quiet quitting, which is not quitting at all.
Yeah.
It's really just setting healthier boundaries. If I'm quiet quitting, I am taking my time to just do everything that needs to be done. I never really fully go above and beyond unless I'm ready to or unless I need to. So that it's an act of self-preservation. I will take care of myself at this moment so I can do more. I can go further.
So speaking of safe spaces, Kat, and also tying it into the older generation and their perspective on things, I recently had an experience with someone from the older generation. I'm not going to name names, I'll offend. But I tried to ask for some boundaries in the heat of an argument. However, that person did not take it so well and instead wanted to take it head on. So what is your advice for younger kids who may ask for some boundaries with people that they respect who are older?
I think especially if the family's feeling entitled to your life.
Right.
How do you deal with that?
Yeah.
It's very common with parents, but also with several other people as well. I also know those that are our age that also deal with arguments and altercations in that way, where you can't leave this conversation until we've fixed this.
Right.
But there are many other people or people like us where we want to kind of take a step back before we say things we don't mean.
Yes.
Right? And in the heat of the moment, you tend to say things that you can't seem to take back anymore.
Right.
They're just because of emotions.
Yeah.
And you tend to hurt other people so much more in that process.
Right.
So when we talk about our boundaries, it's not simply about shutting them out and saying that, I don't want to talk about this because you're literally slamming the door in their faces.
Right.
By the way that I have learned to do this is by recognizing and hearing them and acknowledging what they're saying. I know that you're mad. I know we both want to fix this. We are on the same page that we both want what's best for this. We both are on the same page where we want the best for our family, the best for our friends or whoever that is. But setting that ground where you both see eye to eye and recognize that you want to fix this, right? But also sharing with them that I think right now I just need, you can give them a timeline, right? Just so that it's clear for them, it's tangible for them.
That you're coming back.
That you're gonna come back to this, we're gonna solve this versus I'm gonna shut this door in your face and we're never gonna talk about it again. Because that's what they want. They want a resolution. Right? So by sharing with them and communicating effectively that, okay, this is what I'm feeling right now. I understand and I hear you and I know we're both very angry at this moment, but I just need some time and space. Let's get back to this tomorrow when we've both kind of cooled off, and then we can talk about it and talk about the next steps. There will be times where this is not going to be received as well, no matter how well you communicate. And the only way that this would be better for you is just to also recognize that they're also dealing with personal things themselves.
Right.
The way that they react or act towards you is a reflection of who they are and the way they cope with issues, the way they were taught to deal with issues and altercations. So it's never a reflection of it shouldn't be something you take personally, that this is not on me. This is not for me to feel guilty if this person is dealing with this issue in the way that they are.
Right.
This can be difficult when it comes to families or people that we trust and love. Of course, we don't want to ruin our relationships. Of course, we don't want to cut them off. But in the event that they don't want to listen as well, it's okay to take that break. Communicate it with them effectively. Talk to people that they love about it, so that it's not about being marites or chismis to others, but someone who is also on both your sides, that can also be in your corner and support you when they end up speaking with other people, so that they also see your side of the process.
Makes sense. Duly noted.
What advice would you have to somebody who's identified some of their issues, but there's so much darkness, maybe a phase has turned into a lifestyle and they can't seem to break out of that negativity, out of that depression? Perhaps they don't like their medication, it's not working. What advice do you have to somebody struggling with that?
Right. I'm going to take it out of my personal experience when I did get diagnosed for the first time. It would have been so easy for me to just sit with that diagnosis and say, you know what, the rest of the world is going to have to adjust to me now and walk there around like eggshells around me, because this is who I am. I'm depressed and everybody's got to adjust. It's so easy to be there and to stay stuck. When you are going through trauma, when you are going through that state of depression or anxiety, you imagine yourself as being in the water, an open sea, and you're struggling to swim, and you're drowning. And the feeling is drowning. And when people have gone through that stage of depression for a very long time, it feels like home to them.
Right.
This feels comfortable, and people will understand it. Every time I say I'm depressed, they'll understand that this is how I am, and this is who I am. It's so easy to stay there. When you're going through therapy, it's not an easy process. Doing the work and healing is literal work. It's hard work, and it's not always just as easy as popping a medication and feeling so much better and masking yourself for it. You have to think, at least for most diagnoses, I don't say that for all, there's some that are really on maintenance medications. For most, it's like a life buoy, where you're just throwing a life buoy so that you can stay afloat. When I went through my medications, it really felt numbing.
Yes.
And it's not great to feel numb. And I told my psychiatrist about it, and she said, that's not numbing, it's a normal feeling. That's the feeling of being normal.
Wow.
And I said, I don't like it, because I feel like a robot. I don't like feeling this way. And she said, you only need that so that you can, you've been used to extreme emotions for so long, it feels like this is robotic feeling, but it's not. And you need to do that so that you can go about your normal day, be able to sleep properly, be able to eat properly, just regulate everything else. And then we go to therapy and do the work while we are in this state. So you're not meant to be holding on to the life buoy forever.
You have to learn how to swim.
Exactly. You have to eventually learn how to float on your own. And that's usually how life is. You never really fully get off of the water, because there's always going to be something that's going to happen to you where it feels like you're back in the water and drowning again. But this time, I know how to swim. If not, I'll dive into it. Right? So that's the way I've looked at diagnosis, and that's the way I've looked at people going through very dark periods in their life, where they feel that they seem like, this is who I am now, it's comfortable to be here. And it's okay to stay there for as long as you want, but eventually you're going to have to decide to take yourself out of there. You're going to have to be able to put in the work, because as much as I can, with people that are going through that phase in their lives, we always want them to feel that there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. There's always, you swimming and going back to shore and finally enjoying like a somewhat normal life and living the life the way that you should.
Love it.
Yeah. Slay.
Yes, slay. So speaking of, working towards being able to swim again, I know that people are also working towards minimizing their screen time. I know it's a very pivotal problem that Filipinos have now. I think they call it doom scrolling. So what advice would you give younger kids on how they can minimize their screen time? And also, of course, stop the comparison that, you know, us humans usually get when you see someone else online.
It's kind of weird that we're speaking about this and they're watching this on social media.
Right.
Minimize screen time.
It's not doom scrolling though. Minimize screen time, but subscribe.
Yeah. And follow.
But except for this.
Except for this one.
I do agree. Like a lot of mental health issues have been caused by social media, and there are so many studies that have proven that as well. Because when you're online, there are all of these negative. I just call them generally news. There's always this news. There are so many things that are going on in the world. There's climate change. There's war. There's a lot of things that can make us feel worried and anxious.
Right.
And at the same time, there are also families and friends where they have the most filtered versions of their life and that you tend to compare yourself with. Like, why am I not in Japan right now? Why am I not?
Everyone was in Japan during the holidays.
I don't know why.
I know.
But why am I not here? Why am I not living my best life?
Right.
And you're here, you're stuck, you're at work and you're scrolling through very filtered versions of other people where you can't help but compare yourself. And it sometimes may not feel apparent, but when you're doing that, when you're scrolling mindlessly, it gets stuck in the back of your head that, okay, I mean, you know, next time I'm going to go to this resort and I'm going to do this thing. And it's not helpful, right? And when you're doom scrolling as well, in a very similar way, you can't help but look through news and see comments, and you know the comments are going to be negative. You know the comments are going to have bad things, but you can't help but like be Marites and do
it for the plot.
Exactly, just reading through it, and it's also not good for your mental health. Social media has done so many wonderful things as well. It's helped us become connected. The world has now been a lot more connected and smaller. It's brought us to many different channels and wonderful people who share their messages, positive messages as well. So I can't fully say to completely rid yourself of online access, because it can be good. But just like taking care of your mental health, being able to recognize when it's already too much. And I say this recognizing also my privilege, that I can take a step back and say no to it. For a lot of people, their reality is the war. For a lot of people, their reality is the issues brought about climate change. And it's so hard to turn a blind eye on those things. But when we're taking care of our mental health, when we're putting in the work, it's not, in the very similar way of also being able to help yourself, go offline. If you want to do the work, if you want to help, be out there, volunteer, go to places where you feel like you need the most help. Take yourself out of the channel that's bringing you most anxiety and actually take that chance to be a part of the solution. And it helps so much more when I feel and when I recognize issues that I see on social media. It's not that I feel better about it, but I know I'm doing my part. I am confident that whatever I'm seeing on social media, I'm also doing my part to be part of the solution.
Wow. I love that. Speaking of solutions, what are some things that we can do, some self-affirming practices, things to make us feel better? What do you recommend for our viewers so that they can make their lives more positive and more healthy?
I think the number one is, when you can, and if you do have the resources for it, go to therapy. Okay. That's the first. You don't have to you don't have to feel anything immediately for you to have access to that. At least once in your life, just do 3 sessions of therapy, just check in and see where you're at. And that can do so many wonders in how you live day to day and how you can be more mindful. If you don't have the access to it, there are several channels that can make that accessible. Mindnation has 24/7 chat that's free for anyone to just chat with a care coordinator or a well-being coach.
People really open up about their lives on this free chat.
They do.
Oh, wow.
They do.
What's the website for this?
It's just on Facebook. So you have, so you can just go on Facebook, just search facebook.com/mindnation, or even on Instagram at mindnation 24/7. Just chat with us if whatever you're feeling, whether that's a good thing. For some people, they don't know who they can share good news with. They'll be there. This is great. I'm so happy for you. And you have a friend anytime that's available. And if you feel like you need to go to therapy, they'll be able to connect you with the therapist as soon as possible as well. And that's a solution that we've made easily accessible for them to make it such a normal thing to speak to someone about it, even if it's a stranger. So that's one. Another is, of course, like the practice of mindfulness. You have fun of the day, which is journaling, and that's such a wonderful practice that I have learned as well to do every day. You can also do it every week. I have several journals that I do. Like every Sunday, I just write it down what I feel for the week, and there's some great journals that have the prompts as well. If you feel like you don't know,
I've seen these.
What to write, right? And they're wonderful because they allow you to reflect. A lot of the overthinking comes from us just being so in our heads. And when you put it down to paper and actually physically write it down, it helps so much. It can be just random things or random words, but when you recognize and when you look at it, you see, and you can also take the time to assess what you've written. And when you note it down and you say like, oh, you know what, that's actually not true. Like today, I feel like my best friend doesn't like me because of this, this, and this. And then you look at it.
Please no.
You have a read. It's like, yes, that's true.
Your diary. Maureen did this today.
And then you reflect, and then you get to assess your thoughts, and it helps with the whole process also, so that you don't take that as truth. Our feelings, they're valid, but they're not always facts, right? So by being able to put that on paper and see it physically, what it is that you feel, what it is that you put it physically on paper, it helps clear.
Helps you actually wrap your head around it.
Exactly, right. There are times also where like I kind of review past entries, and I'm just like, I think this was the other week where I'd written, today was such a great day, I did this and that. I was like, I wonder what I was thinking the other week. And it was just like all really heavy stuff. So like, what was I going through last week? But then when you realize that that's a flow, it's easier for me to recognize that in those bad moments, okay, I felt this terribly last week. The next week, I felt great. So you can allow yourself to feel those emotions and just let it pass.
Right.
Because emotions is just energy in motion, emotion. Just let it flow.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Even sometimes, if we've ever had agreement, we've never had a big disagreement. But I make sure to write down, if we're facing an issue, all of my thoughts, and then I pick the ones that are relevant. Because sometimes the ego, certain things, you're not seeing clearly. And so I wholeheartedly agree with writing down how you're feeling, dissecting it, so you can really have some perspective on the matter and flush out all of those emotions.
She really is my therapist. You know, when I do rant to her in the past about my relationship or arguments that I have in my relationship, I tell it to Mau, and she'd always tell me, you know what, rant it out all to me, and then write it down so that when you do bring up the topic with your partner, then that's you could only tell them the most important details. Which is a great advice. I think it's one of your best advices.
And I think also as a friend, when we're giving each other advice, we never tell each other what to do. Like, break up with them. It's always more like, I'm sorry you feel that way. Perhaps you should dive deeper into that emotion. Why are you triggered? Why does this affect you?
What's the root cause?
Yeah, always dig deeper, because oftentimes there's always a reason.
Yeah, you're always fighting about the more shallow portion of the argument, but there's really something deeper. Yeah,
at the bottom of the iceberg.
And that's such a great kind of social support that you need to have. Someone that's not always just a cheerleader or enabler, that's just always on your side. Like, I feel like I'm gonna key his car today, and then your best friend's just like, you should do it.
I'm aware of yes man.
There have been moments.
It's just kind of life,
but just good to
have a balance.
But like someone that's all truly on your side will also tell you and be honest with you when it's not.
It's too much.
Exactly.
Yeah, those are the true friends, I think. The ones who challenge you and challenge your perspective sometimes. For, of course, your betterment.
It's accountability.
Yeah. And it takes a lot for you also to admit and recognize that, okay, this person wants the best for me.
Exactly.
Right. So I think that's a great thing to have. My best friend though, she's learned to do this thing where I feel like she is also recognizing when I talk too much about a certain thing. Because there are those boundaries also. When, okay, you've already talked about this for 3 weeks, it's been the same problem. Do you want to solve it?
Yes.
Because if you don't want to solve it, every time you bring this up or every time you say this person's name, you're going to have to do a push-up. And I'm just like, I'm going to get so jacked.
Let's still talk about it.
I'll still talk about it, but I'll do it.
That's a good one. We should take that one.
So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. So right now, let's take a break from our interesting conversation and move on to our game part called Slay or Waylay.
So in Slay or Waylay, if you agree with a statement, say slay. And if you disagree, say waylay.
Okay.
All right, today's category is mind, health, and me.
Okay, so for your first question, or statement rather, it is okay not to be okay. Slay or waylay?
I said this already.
You did.
I say slay,
Okay.
but with caveat, like what they said also, you can get, and it's so easy for someone to stay in the not be okay part, right? When you say it's okay not to be okay, it's okay to feel all of these negative emotions. It's completely normal. But you can also choose to take yourself out of that. Know when what your boundaries are. Know your limits. It can be a time limit. It can be when you're feeling a certain way. But you have to be able to do the work also to feel better.
Yes.
Slay or waylay, doing a brain dump to manage overthinking. And a brain dump for our viewers at home is really writing down all of your feelings or even doing it on a voice note, just saying anything and everything on your mind to process your feelings.
Slay.
Slay.
Like we talked
Slay.
about earlier with
journaling.
it's such a helpful tool. Sometimes you just need to flush it out.
Facts. Okay, number 3, slay or waylay, participating in a pity party to feel better.
I'm gonna say waylay. I'm
Of
gonna
course.
say waylay with that. Sometimes, it's tempting, right? Because you kind of want someone to just feel and also recognize that you're not feeling your best. But it can be less helpful than it should be, than it's intended to. It can bring you down to a lot deeper feelings or maybe even anger and resentment than what it's originally supposed to be for.
True. I agree.
Slay or waylay, isolating yourself during difficult moments.
Ooh, this is a tough one because I am very guilty of this. I would say waylay, right? More than anything, at the very moment when you feel like you need to isolate yourself, it's more important to be with the people that you trust and love. It doesn't have to be 10 people. It can be 5, it can be 1. But in moments where you feel like it's the most difficult, that's when you need your tribe, that's when you need your support system. And it can be so hard to admit that, but you need that.
Okay, question number 5, slay or waylay, practicing mindfulness with journaling.
Oh, yeah, that's slay.
Slay or waylay, seeking professional help when everything feels overwhelming.
Super slay. How many slays do I
think
do?
That's the first advice you gave us, right? To go to a therapist.
Exactly. When you can and when you're ready, of course. But I like I said, I recognize that it's not as easily accessible for everyone, and like organizations like Mindnation are working towards making that a possibility for as much people as possible. But if you can, and the help that's needed is when other people, the community also does its part as well, by training themselves, by making themselves more aware. In the Philippines, just a quick fact, not so fun fact, is that we do have a limitation in experts and psychologists. So there is a lack of experts as well. That's what makes the price so high. But there's hope. There's more people. There's more youth that are taking on psychology courses, going to clinical therapy as a career. So we are seeing hope there. So what the best we can do for now is within the community and within ourselves is to continue the education process, continue the awareness, and keep talking about it.
I agree. It's not a bad career to have now.
Yes, it's in demand.
Yeah. Okay, number 7 and last question for slay or willay. Slay or willay having accountability partners among family and friends?
Yes, slay.
Yes, like your sister.
Yes,
Okay. Slay
slay.
to that.
Doesn't have to be a lot of people.
Mhm.
You can speak to the people that you trust the most
Mhm.
about talking about being able to set boundaries, keeping you in check as well,
Yes.
and being able to know you through and through to recognize also when you're not feeling your best. Because sometimes it's also something you aren't aware of.
Mhm.
My friends and even my sister notices it when I am going through an episode or a funk, when I'm only eating a certain meal, a certain kind of meal.
I see.
Call it my depression meal. When I'm only eating that, I usually don't recognize it. At first, this is the only thing I'm craving for. And they're like, are you okay? Maybe we should talk about it. It's great to have friends who pick up on that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So true. So to wrap up our game of slay and willay, I think that was also very, very insightful. So thank you, Kat. And now we're going to move on to our next segment called Share and Slay, where we talk about what we've learned throughout this episode.
Our episode recap.
Exactly.
So I think my biggest takeaways from this episode were really, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to set boundaries. And you really need to be authentic and honest about your emotions in order to understand them.
Yeah, I agree. And I also really appreciate the tips you gave us on how to deal with your friends or people of an older generation and how to go about expressing yourself the best way possible too.
Do you have any last words of encouragement or advice for our viewers at home?
Yeah, well, of course, thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for coming.
And thank you to all the madams that are also listening in. It's so great. Always so great to be talking about mental health care as something that needs to be normalized. And of course, what we've touched so far, it's only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to mental health. And it's something that runs far deeper, and it's something that you don't usually get right the first time, because each and every individual deal with their mental health in different ways.
Right.
So I wish I could encapsulate and have just an overarching advice for everyone on how to take better care of their mental health. But it's something that I myself, and I'm also still in the learning process of doing. I'm continuously healing. We're all a work in progress.
Yes.
And for as long as we recognize that there will be those bad days and know that there is hope for the future, there is hope for me moving forward, and for each and everyone to have that support system around them, it brings us closer to hope that we will eventually have a community that truly cares about people's mental health and well-being at such difficult times in the world today. I recognize also that there are a lot of things that's really beyond our control. No matter how much we take care of ourselves, how much we learn about mental health, how much we try to limit our social media and do our self-care, it can be hard with a world that feels like it's crumbling all around you. It's hard to take care of yourself when you know and recognize that there are so many things that are going on within the world. But if anything, it's something that has helped me truly, apart from therapy, is knowing that I am also doing my part. Keeping yourself accountable with how to take care of the people and the planet, how to make things better for others, and how to use your gifts to serve others. Those are one of the many ways that you eventually recognize that your problems, things that you are possibly facing, and the difficulties that you're facing are so small in the grand scheme of things. That you are such a big part of the solution. And recognizing that you can do so many things, you're capable of so many things, can help you become the best possible version of yourself.
Slay to that.
Thank you so much, Kat. Where can we follow you, and where do we see you, Kat?
Yeah, so on social media, you can follow my personal account at Sinasikat. You can see all the wonderful adventures that I have there and the things that I do. You can follow Mind Nation on social media as well, on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. You can download our app that's for free, where you can do 24/7 chat and speak to a therapist there as well. Of course, the fees, we try to make it as affordable and as accessible as possible. If you have an organization or a team and you want to bring in benefits of mental health, you can call Mind Nation as well. But yeah, that's usually where you find me. Other than that, maybe somewhere in the ocean.
Oh yeah, you love scuba diving. So hopefully when you do become a certified instructor, Maureen and I will be there.
We will go there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Kat. And that does it for us here on this episode of Slay Now with Sam
and Mau. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on YouTube and Spotify.
You can also follow us on our social media accounts on Instagram.
What's yours, Miss Samantha?
Mine is at Samantha Panlilio for both Instagram and TikTok, and you can also follow my baby lady at Lady Panlilio on Instagram.
Yes, I'm her godmother. Thank you. And you can follow me at Maureen Montagne on Instagram and at Maureen on TikTok.
Again, we want to thank our sponsors, JC Premier, for making this show possible.
Also, a special thank you to our friends and family at Fridays Puerto Galera for co-presenting today's episode.
We also want to thank Pat Studios and ReelReve.
This has been
Slay Now with Sam
and Mau,
your ultimate guide in facing each day, ready to slay.
Bye!
Thank you, mga madam.